welcome back. Thanks for watching. This is my second video on this channel, and today I'm going to be talking about my experience traveling alone in Guatemala, Central America. I've been here in Guatemala the last 5 weeks or so, just over a month. I'm actually leaving today. I've had an amazing experience in Guatemala. I'm going to go through everything, kind of like I did in the last video. I'm going to talk about each place that I visited. I first want to start off by saying one of the reasons Guatemala has stood out to me out of all the places I've traveled is the unbelievable nature here. Of course, there's so many countries with beautiful nature. Guatemala is so unique in the sense that, it has 35 volcanoes. If you're really into hiking, it's a brilliant country to visit. So many beautiful lakes. It has the rainforest in the north and a more tropical climate. So it's a great country to visit if you're into hiking and outdoor activities. So the way that I've been traveling here in Central America, I currently work online. I might do another video talking about this. I tutor English. So in terms of accommodation, what I normally do is I stay in an Airbnb or in a more private accommodation when I'm tutoring, because I need good Wi-Fi and I need privacy for doing all of my calls. And then for the other days of the week, I tend to stay in hostels or I go for more simple, cheaper options. Something else I also want to mention before I start posting these videos of my travels in Latin America is that I am currently learning Spanish. I'm too embarrassed to say anything right now in Spanish because it's absolutely terrible. I'm very much a beginner. But yeah, I have a teacher. I have classes with her 2 to 3 times a week, and I'm also studying independently. I would really recommend, if you're going to travel in Central America for an extended period of time, to pick up at least a bit of Spanish. First of all, because I think it's polite. I think it's polite if you visit a place to learn at least the basics, because then you can connect more with the locals. But besides that, if you don't learn any basic Spanish, you will have a hard time surviving here in Guatemala. The level of English is very poor, which is to be expected because it's a country in Central America. People speak Spanish, not English, right? So I would really recommend working on your Spanish if you're going to travel to Central American countries such as Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, and so on. So the first place that I visited in Guatemala was Flores, which is kind of like a small island in the north of the country. I actually came here from Belize, so I got a bus across the border, and this was actually a really easy process. We had to wait for a long time at immigration, but I didn't have any issues crossing the border. It went pretty smoothly. Flores, like I said, is a small island. It's connected to the mainland of Guatemala by a road, and on the actual island, you can walk around it within 20 minutes. But there's also the other side of the island. You can get boats to the other side and go hiking and go to museums and to Mayan ruins. So the climate here is very humid because it's close to the rainforest in Pitan. A lot of mosquitoes, unfortunately, but it was a super cool vibe. It had a jungle or rainforest-like atmosphere. I only stayed in Flores for 3 days, so I didn't take part in any of the day trips. I mostly just hung out on the island. But one place that I did like was called Jorge's Rope Swing. You get a boat across the water from the main island to the other side, and there you can chill out in this place that has drinks, a place to just relax, some hammocks, and also a really cool view of the water. And they also have this really nice rope swing, which was a lot of fun. It's super cool to go swimming in the lake also. The only thing is that boat across the water cost a good bit of money. If I'm remembering correctly, it was between 10 and 20 euros. It was definitely a tourist trap, but I knew that they weren't going to charge me any less, even when I bargained. So I just went with it. Another one of the highlights of Flores was going to this local bar one of the nights. Unfortunately, I can't remember the name, but there's a lot of local bars if you just walk by the water during the night, and a lot of good music and things like that. There was this group of local people there who were half Guatemalan, half American, and they were super friendly and invited me to dance with them. The other highlight of Flores is that I would say it was relatively cheap. Even though it's a touristic place, it didn't cost too much to eat out, like these amazing tacos. And the hostel, I can't remember exactly, but it was less than $10 a night for sure. After leaving Flores, I went to Shela, also known as Quetzaltenango, which took quite a while, I'm not going to lie. It was sort of a hectic day. I'd say it was over 16 hours of transport altogether. I had to get a bus from Flores to Guatemala City, and then from Guatemala City, where the traffic is horrific, to Shela. So Shela is in the west of Guatemala and it confuses a lot of people because there's two names. Basically, the Spanish conquest of Guatemala started in the early 1500s, and prior to the colonization, this city was called Shela, its Mayan name, the indigenous civilization living in Guatemala at the time. After it was colonized, this name was replaced by the Spanish name, which was Quetzaltenango. And one of the things I really liked about Shela was the preservation of the indigenous culture. You can see a lot of people wearing the traditional Mayan outfits, like these ones here. And the people there speak a very clear Spanish, sometimes with a Mayan dialect, which is thought to be the reason why a lot of people go to Shela to learn Spanish. There's a lot of Spanish schools there because the people there speak with a very clear accent and they tend to speak quite slowly. One of the main things that attracts people to Shela is the numerous volcanoes surrounding the city. 2 hours from Shela is also volcano Tajumuco, which is the highest volcano in Central America. Unfortunately, I didn't end up doing this, but if you're really into hiking, it's definitely a good place to go. So, this is one of the reasons as to why a lot of people pass through Shela, even though it's less touristic in comparison to other cities. Even though I didn't end up doing Tajumuco, I did go to a couple of other volcanoes, including Amalonga. Amalonga is a less popular volcano. However, it's the closest one to the city, so it's a little bit more convenient to get to. I just got an Uber motorbike to the entrance and then I started from there. I did end up getting ridiculously lost, but it actually turned out to be a really nice hike anyway. I ended up staying in Shela for quite a while, mostly because the cost of living and the cost of travel is much lower there in comparison to more touristic cities. So, renting an Airbnb to do my work in was way more cost effective. Due to this, I feel like I did get to know the city quite well. There's a lot of nice parks, there's a really beautiful cathedral, and there's a lot of places to just walk around. Also, because the city is on a higher altitude and surrounded by volcanoes, the climate is a lot more comfortable in comparison to places like Flores. I would say the average temperature most of the days I was there was roughly 20 degrees Celsius. The next city I want to talk about is Antigua, which, to be honest, was probably the highlight of my trip to Guatemala. I loved this city so much. It's this beautiful colonial city. It's quite small, quite touristic, but I would say a good balance of locals and tourists. And I just think it's absolutely beautiful. Like the architecture, the views. The hostel I stayed at was a lot of fun as well, but it was a party hostel, so probably not the best if you don't like noise. One of the main reasons that people go to Antigua is to hike Acatenango or Mount Fuego, these two volcanoes. Mount Fuego is famous for being an active volcano. It erupts every 15 to 30 minutes. A lot of people asked me if it's safe, but yes, it's completely safe. As long as you hike with a guide that knows what they're doing, a local that knows the area, and you don't go too close to the top, it's perfectly safe. So basically, you hike Acatenango, which is like a smaller volcano, and from there you can see Mount Fuego erupting. You can also do an extra part to the hike where you hike a little bit further and you see the volcano erupting from close up. Unfortunately, I didn't get a lot of videos of the actual hike because it was pretty exhausting. I was really tired. The first part of the hike is quite hard, I'm not going to lie. It's quite steep and it's also pretty hot at that time of day. And then once you get to the top, it's quite cold. So, whatever company you do the hike with, they will give you the gear. Company I used is called CA Travelers, and I would highly recommend them. The last two places I visited were San Pedro La Laguna, a town on the Lake Atitlan, and also Guatemala City, the capital city. San Pedro La Laguna was so beautiful. I really enjoyed it here. It's super relaxing. It's just like this small town with a lot of beautiful views of the lake. And also, the accommodation I stayed at was super cheap. It was like a big tent. Unfortunately, I don't have any pictures with beds inside and also a fan. And honestly, it was perfect because the weather was kind of hot there. So I think it was so good staying outside. And it only cost about €5 a night, I believe, €5 or €6, if not a bit less. This location was perfect. It was literally right on the lake, right next to the small beach.
I went swimming in the lake almost every day, which was amazing. You can also do a lot of activities, like a lot of water sports and things like that, like kayaking, stand-up paddleboarding, and so on. There's also another small village close to the lake, which is called San Juan. There isn't a lot to do there, but it's kind of pretty. It's really nice to walk around. I went there for one night only and went to this bar where there was a pig just hanging out. Not sure why, but it was pretty cool. And yeah, if you want to go to San Juan from San Pedro, you can easily get a tuk-tuk for like 10 quetzals. It's a little bit over €1 or $1. Another highlight of San Pedro La Laguna was hiking the San Pedro volcano, which was pretty amazing. I would say it was a relatively difficult hike. It's not too steep, which is good, but it's quite long and it took a while, even though it's only 3,000 meters. I think it was a good practice for hiking Acatenango because I went to Antigua the week afterwards. The only thing is that you have to pay 100 quetzals, which is €10, to hike the volcano. So I think it's a bit of an expensive entrance fee, but the volcano is really well taken care of and really well marked and safe. So I guess it's worth it. I kept Guatemala City until the end because honestly, I don't have a lot to say about Guatemala City. It's just like your standard capital city. I wasn't the biggest fan, if I'm being honest. However, I did really like the architecture. There's a lot of really interesting museums, such as the Mayan History Museum, if you want to learn more about the Mayan culture, a lot of beautiful churches and cathedrals. But yeah, overall, it wasn't my favorite place in Guatemala. I would also say that the safety and the security is a little bit sketchier in Guatemala City. You should definitely be more careful and be aware of the area.
So thank you for watching the video and making it this far. Before we end, I'm going to go through some logistical stuff like I did in the previous video. The first thing I want to talk about is the safety, because I think that that's one of the most important things. I think usually when people travel, they're the most concerned about two things, the safety and the budget as well. Overall, I felt pretty safe as a solo female here in Guatemala. A lot of the travel I did in Guatemala was alone. I did meet some other people and travel with them a little bit here and there, but a lot of the time I was traveling solo. I had a little bit of harassment in Guatemala City and here in Quetzaltenango, but it was very minimal. Of course, we shouldn't have to go through that, but as women, you know, we do experience this from time to time. It wasn't enjoyable, but it wasn't anything severe, and I didn't feel unsafe at any point. I just felt a little bit uncomfortable, you know. But overall, I found the locals here in Guatemala to be very friendly, very helpful, kind, very patient when it comes to my Spanish, because as I mentioned, I'm a beginner, but they're very patient. They always let me finish talking and they try their hardest to understand me and speak slowly, which I really appreciate. They've also been amazing with helping me, like when I've been lost, looking for the buses. They have a bit of a crazy transport system here, which I'll get into in a minute. The one place I would recommend being a bit careful in, especially if you're a solo female, is Guatemala City. Like most capital cities, you know, the crime rate is higher and it's just a little bit sketchy. Like I wouldn't recommend walking around a lot on your own after dark. Don't carry a lot of cash with you on local buses. If you are carrying cash, I would recommend putting it in different pockets. Just be careful with your things. However, you know, in comparison to some other cities I've visited before in Latin America, I felt pretty safe with my stuff. I was able to walk around with my phone out. So the next thing is the cost. Because I came to Guatemala by land, I got a bus from Belize and I'm also leaving by land. I'm going today on a bus to El Salvador. I can't really advise on the cost of flights. However, Guatemala City does have a lot of flight connections, so I think it's relatively easy to find affordable flights. Well, affordable is relative, of course, but affordable by Latin American standards because the flights are quite expensive here. If you want to travel by land, which is what I've been trying to do as much as I can during this trip, because it's obviously better for the environment and it sometimes is also cheaper. And I think it's also a more interesting experience because you get to see stuff along the way that you would miss on the plane. The bus coming from Belize was like $20, or I don't know, it's like €18 or something. In terms of Airbnbs, the Airbnb that I've been staying at was give or take like 10 to €20 per night. Hostels are normally like max 10 or €11 per night, if not cheaper than that. You can find more budget-friendly options, but they might not be in good areas, etc. So just be careful with that, especially in Guatemala City, because there's some areas that have high crime rates. So just research where you're staying if the cost is really low or seems too good to be true. Regarding food, if you want to eat out in Guatemala, of course, this will depend on what city you're in. Smaller cities that are a bit less touristic, like here in Quetzaltenango, you can have a pretty decent meal, local or Western food, for €4 to €5 without alcohol. In a more expensive city like Guatemala City, Antigua, it could be somewhere between €5 and €10. But if you want to eat local food, there's also a lot of street food options, a lot of stalls where you can buy food in most cities. Regarding transport, so if you want to get the local buses here, Guatemalans call them chicken buses or camionetas in Spanish. And this is basically, I don't even know how to describe the chicken buses, but I love them so much. I feel like there's kind of a divide between backpackers in Central America. There's people that love the chicken buses, and then there's people that absolutely hate them. There's drive well over the speed limit, people jumping off and on the bus, the guys working on the bus, like I have so much respect for them. They're like Spider-Man, like climbing on top of the bus to take people's suitcases off. I personally had no bad experiences on the chicken buses. I took them all the time I was here, and I thought that they were a lot of fun and a really good opportunity to interact with the locals and kind of see a lot more places. There's also a lot of local people that come on the buses to sell food and things like that, like the local food. So I think it's actually a good opportunity to integrate with the culture a bit more. However, they are a little bit dangerous, and I have also heard stories of people being robbed on the chicken buses. Nothing like this happened to me at all. I didn't feel unsafe at one point whatsoever, but I have read stories before from other backpackers that had problems on the buses. So if you want to take them, it's totally up to you. If you do take them, do not put your stuff on top of the bus. Just keep your stuff inside the bus with you. Put it on the railings that are above your seat. They are, however, a lot cheaper. So the main touristic bus companies or coach companies in Guatemala are Shela Bus, a company called Christopher Colon, and also Pullmantur. So if you want to take one of these buses, they will probably be like twice, if not 3 or 4 times the price of one of the chicken buses. So personally, I found the chicken buses a better way to just save money. Also, you get to the place a lot faster because the driver is driving so fast. Also, I wanted to mention the cost of the tour that I did. I really think that this experience was so incredible, seeing the active volcano. I would 100% do it again. It was give or take 90 USD, which is around €80, I think, which sounds expensive, but actually this included a lot of things. So this included transport to the place. It included renting all of the gear. You need a lot of gear up there because you need to carry a sleeping bag, you need a coat, you need gloves. It's really cold on top of the volcano. It also included all of your food for 1.5 days. It included water and a camelback, which is like a bag that you wear on your chest, where you can sip your water from through a straw. So it's a lot more convenient and a bit less heavy than carrying a big bottle of water in your rucksack, because like I mentioned, you do have to carry all of your stuff up the volcano. And I really like the organization and the vision that they have. They do a lot of charity work and volunteer work. Like I mentioned earlier, it's called CA Travelers. So I would definitely recommend booking with them. I saw a lot of other tours for the pretty much the same experience, if not less things included, and it was way more expensive than the tour that I went for in the end. The last thing I want to mention before I end the video, just as a side note, is the internet situation in Guatemala, the electricity situation, and also getting a SIM for your phone. For some people, this might not matter too much. However, for me, like I mentioned, I'm working remotely. So having decent internet or having a SIM that I can use a hotspot from is a must, because I'm always on video calls for my job. If I don't have a good internet connection, it really disrupts my job. It's frustrating for me and for my students, and it also means that I lose income. The internet I found is a little bit hit or miss. The Airbnb that I've been staying in a lot of the time while I was here and I was working, the internet wasn't the best. So I did get a SIM card. I used the company Claro. They're pretty popular. You can find Claro in most Latin American countries, in both Central and South America. Top up, it's a little bit pricey because you do burn through the credit pretty fast when you're using the hotspot all the time. However, it was the best option for me. Another company here in Guatemala called Tigo. However, I don't know anything about this company, so you might want to read reviews if you choose to go with them. Claro, I would highly recommend though. I didn't have any problems and it was super easy to buy the SIM. I literally just went to the shop and they gave me it in like 10 minutes. Regarding electricity, so the Guatemalan government declared an electricity emergency. There was a lot of disruptions to electricity supply and water supply. Luckily, the worst of it happened before I came here. Well, not luckily, of course, for local people. I mean, like for me specifically. By the time I got here, it wasn't as big of a problem. So I did experience a few electricity outages while I was here in Guatemala, but it really wasn't as much as I was expecting. I was expecting it to be a lot worse. It only disrupted my work with tutoring, I would say 1 or 2 times. And it also happened once when I was in the north, because in the north, the rainfall is a bit heavier and more tropical, so it can be a bit more common. However, some of the electricity outages are planned, so you can always ask at the hostel or the Airbnb that you stay in, ask the local people and see if they have any more information about when you're not going to have power so that you can be prepared. Okay, that's going to be it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Overall, I had an amazing time here in Guatemala. I would highly recommend it. Like I said, the nature is just incredible, and if you have the opportunity to visit, you really should. Thank you for watching. The next video will probably be about El Salvador, which is where I am going tomorrow. Bye!